Well, welcome everyone to the Telemedia News in 10. This is our 10th episode. We've only got another 7,825 until we get to be sort of EastEnders territory. It's me, Jarvis Todd, the publisher of Telemedia News, Telemedia Magazine, and all things Telemedia. And him over there.
Oh, that worked so well in rehearsals.
Our esteemed editor, the beard behind Telemedia, the hermit of all things Telemedia. He locks himself in a cave and he writes about Telemedia all day long. That's the kind of stuff that people are doing on their mobile phones, adding value to the network. It's the content. It's how we reach them. It's how we bill them. And we are going to spend the next 10 minutes running through a couple of red-hot news stories. And I think this time, something a little bit different. We're actually going to preview some news. So over to you, Paul. First thing on the list. Hello, mate, by the way.
Yes, hello. Good to see you. I've seen lockdowns treating you well.
Well, as you can see, I've been out chopping wood. We're now running out of fuel. So listen, mate, it seems like we haven't spoken for ages. So I think we had a break, and so there's been lots that's been going across your desk, I know. And the first thing was something that you mentioned football a lot, although I don't think you're actually much of a football fan yourself, are you?
No, I don't mind a bit of football, but I'm not an avid supporter. My small son is very much into it, so I've had to take interest. But yes, but I'm quite interested in how football and sport generally is using or looking to use carrier billing, because obviously we've been waiting for something major, a major sort of sporting entity to really embrace carrier billing. In fact, he was alive last time we started waiting for carrier billing to come along, and just after the first lockdown, before our second lockdown, which we in the UK are now currently in, the Premier League started charging for one-off views of Premier League matches in conjunction with BT Sport and EE. They were charging £14.95p. One-off charged by carrier billing to watch the match, which we covered in great detail and with great fanfare. Sadly, due to fan pressure, because they've been used to watching a lot of these matches for free during the first lockdown, they are no longer running that service. However, it is an interesting story nonetheless, I think, and still worth talking about, because I think it has proved the point that someone like the Premier League is very much into looking at how to charge for one-off access to its content. Now, perhaps one-off access to one match, particularly in the current climate, isn't the one they want to sort of pursue right now. But I think it does open the gates for looking at a smaller price point for smaller parts of that, highlights, behind the scenes, all those sorts of things. So it struck me as a really sort of interesting story that we've talked about the potential for this many times. We've seen it now in sort of the Fishing Channel and with the National Trust and various other entities starting to use carrier billing to sort of entice people in. And it is really gaining use. And what I particularly like is that they dropped this particular use of carrier billing, but not because of any problems with carrier billing. It was to do purely with just the economics and fan demand for their matches. They want them for free. They can't go and see them live. They don't. Some people feel they're paying twice. It's not, that I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with what they were trying to do. But like I say, it opens the gates for, I think, using carrier billing to charge for bits of this content, which is really where this is all going.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I know that one of the big sales pitches from our sector is how, anyone with rights to great content can extend the value of that content by using the digital channels that are available and sort of ubiquitous through the mobile phone and the kind of channels and routes to market that our industry takes very much, in its stride. I mean, one of the sad things I think about this is that I think this has been skewed by Sky and the Premier League in that, they have a huge amount of subscribers that paid for quite a lot of that content already. The consumers were quite understandably upset that they were getting asked to pay for something once they've been given it for free, or that they felt should automatically have been part of their subscription. And also, at a time when probably the pennies were becoming a bit tighter, in a difficult it was seen as opportunism, I think, in the face of the pandemic. But what I think is particularly sad is if you look at the idea, and I know, as you rightly said, that people would, if you were able to snack on the odd match rather than being locked into an expensive subscription service, you probably would do that. And I think that, for someone like myself, who's a supporter of a League One club, who get very little exposure on TV, certainly no live events to speak of, no live games to speak of, to be able to, download or watch that, spontaneously using carrier billing and using my mobile phone would be a massive benefit. And I think, as I understand it, those clubs at the bottom of the sort of higher, the lower echelons of football, should we say, they would be the ones that would really benefit from that incremental revenue. So it is a shame that it's been dropped, but I suspect we will see it coming back. One other thing I wanted to just point out was that I probably, as you, have been spending a lot of time in the Telemedia 8.1 platform, where you will find some excellent content. And one of the latest sessions is entitled "How Do You Harness the Global Pandemic to Increase Revenues for Your DCB and VAS Services?" And that has been run by Julia de Mambro from Seriously Fresh Media and Features, Phonics and Sam Media. There's a point made in that particular session about how rights holders and football was mentioned, that in the sort of during the pandemic, consumers have had more time to view. They've dug a bit deeper into the kinds of content that they would like to be consuming. And in fact, there's been some really serious engagement with football, but for behind the scenes services and behind the scenes interviews and that kind of stuff. So, despite the fact that this story talks about, pay-per-view for a full match not being a viable anymore, not being something that the Premier League feel they can do, I think that the message seems to be that for football clubs in general, there are a lot of other services that fit very much into the sort of DCB telemedia world.
I think that's a really interesting point about particularly the lower echelons of the Premier League or any other sporting league, is that this can generate incremental revenues for the leagues, for the clubs themselves, and put a lot more attention and interest and finance into the sort of more grassroots areas and levels of football. And I think that's one of the things that carrier billing really enables it to do, because you can make it as smaller charges as you want, really. And deliver full match, parts of matches, behind the scenes things. I think for those dedicated little groups that follow football teams, that get smaller and smaller as you go further and further down the sort of echelons of it, it's a valuable source of income. So yes, I think it's off the table at the moment with the Premier League, but for pandemic based reasons, I think I'm glad they've tried it. I'm sure they will be back with it in some way. Be interested to see how that shapes up, I guess, probably in 2021.
Yeah, and I mean, just also on that, and I know it's something that comes up a lot. I mean, I think one of the biggest problems seems to be that everyone's harnessed onto, certainly harnessed by they all seem to have the same online platforms now, and they all work on a subscription model. And as you've rightly said, there is a thing called subscription fatigue, and not everybody, is as passionate their football team that they want to subscribe for a full year, but they might just want that game.
Or about anything else. It doesn't even have to be sport. I mean, it is sort of often that kind of thing. You think, I don't really want to have to subscribe to yet another sort of video streaming service or music service or news service. I just want to read, watch, enjoy that one piece, and I'll pay for it. And I would probably pay relatively, more per unit than a subscription, but it's that flexibility. And I think a lot of media companies, businesses, leagues, all sorts of things are missing out on a large amount of revenue from sort of occasional and one-off purchases. I think it's again a message that keeps coming through, and I think we're starting to see the beginnings of that being embraced, which is actually something we're come on and talk about in a moment.
Exactly. And talking of messages, the second story that you picked out, entitled "Conversational Commerce, Where Messaging Makes the Sale." And I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where we mentioned Engage and how they integrated payments into the wonderful world of RCS, and we're looking forward to seeing that taking off in 2021. But what were your key takeaways from this particular story?
Well, it was a piece that we ran the other day on the site from Centilli, who are big into conversational commerce and beyond, as I'll come to. But It's essentially the same sort of thing we talked about with Engage and RCS, but just across the much broader sort of spectrum of messaging from SMS, WhatsApp, RCS. It's adding that ability to buy or buy button into messages between businesses and consumers. And we're seeing more and more consumers are WhatsApping each other, and as a consequence, they're wanting to WhatsApp the brands and businesses they deal with. And that's an ideal way for brands to engage. I mean, it's even better in many ways than social media. It's the sort of next step in that sort of social media marketing and social commerce sort of play. And I think we're starting to see platforms that monetize that sort of messaging interaction, and adding a buy button into messaging is the sort of next logical step. And it's starting to happen. It's already massive in China. With sort of AliExpress, which is part of Alibaba, which is a huge marketplace, like the Amazon of China. They do a lot of instant messaging transactions. So it's just where Chinese people sort of have done this sort of from the beginning of e-commerce, really. And it's starting to filter through now into sort of our way of doing business. Particularly, again, like everything driven by the pandemic, more and more people are using instant messaging. It's where consumers are. It's how brands want to reach them, and monetizing that interaction is great. And adding chatbots to it adds a whole new dimension, I think, which is another interesting area that we're going to see a lot more of, I think. So people actually being able to phone up and speak to a chatbot and buy stuff. There's a company called Hotter Shoes that sells sort of comfy shoes, apparently, and they have added sort of the voice side to how their customers could use the internet. So they can essentially shop via voice through a chatbot. It's quite an extensive bit of AI that sits behind it, but the idea is that they can say, ask it questions, and much like you might browse the internet. And this is interesting because I think it adds a whole new way of shopping and a whole new way of people spending money. But it also includes people who are blind and otherwise disabled, who are totally cut out of the move we have towards e-commerce currently in the pandemic. And so, it's only one example that they're doing a trial, but I think we're going to see more and more of this. And it's something I'd sort of like to see the telemedia companies that we have so much involvement with starting to look at how they can maybe leverage this idea of chat and chatbots and messaging and payment platforms to create a much more inclusive and much more versatile sort of commerce platform.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're dead right. And within that piece, actually, I think Scintilla identified what they saw as being the three key differentiators, didn't they? And they're all of what you said: personalization, omni-channel and payments, all in one platform, a robust set of communication channels, and complete payment coverage. If you've got those three covered, you're delivering, A to Z service using messaging and being able to sort of do everything in one place, which. And interestingly, I'd sort of like to again refer back to the Telemedia 8.1 session that I mentioned earlier, and right at the end, Julia asked the panelists what she thought was, well, two things really. One was a prediction for 2021, and the other one was talking about key takeaways on how to improve margins and what was the most important thing about running a telemedia VAS business in the current in today's world. And the first thing that Phonics pointed out was that, SMS is obviously the main channel in terms of being able to communicate business communications with consumers. They didn't see that changing, but that they did see RCS very much taking it, coming into that space and therefore opening up a whole realm of opportunities. And along the same lines, and Sam Media was saying that, that once you've gone to all the trouble of acquiring a customer, onboarding a customer, the very best way to keep them and increase your margins is by keeping them and reducing churn. And therefore CRM is absolutely fundamental. It's not just about numbers, getting them all on, it's about keeping them. The CRM is the best way of doing that, because once you've got good CRM, you can cross-sell, you can move them across the payment mechanisms where perhaps your margins are a bit better. And I think that was interesting that they both they both came at it from a different angle, but in terms of looking at the business communication with your consumer, and you look at RCS, it kind of ticks every single box because it's payments and it's cross-selling as well, and it's CRM and it's happy customers spend more money. So, you know, I thought that, you know, right at the end of that, it was great that Centilli also picked out traditional areas where, you know, perhaps you wouldn't necessarily think of telemedia service providers operating, and food delivery came up. And I was thinking, well, yeah, you know, dead right. I mean, what have we seen now in the last, you know, the pandemic era? Food delivery, and I mean, it's been mentioned before, but not necessarily as being, you know, number one in the list of verticals that you would expect to be identified. And yet, of course, it makes perfect sense. And again, they also talk about reducing shopping cart abandonment, which I know we talked about particularly when we did a seminar on gaming, and obviously that they also mentioned re-engagement of gamers. And again, you know, an obvious application and an obvious group that you would expect respond pretty positively to this kind of technology. So, yeah, I mean, it brought this brings together a whole bunch of different areas, doesn't it? Whereas, you know, traditionally we talk about the payment side, the marketing side, the billing side, you know, and the content side. Whereas in fact, you know, when you're talking about RCS, it really is starting to be that sort of omni-channel. Now, just on that, you know, I don't like acronyms, and I just like to bring in a new feature, which is Acronym Alert. And the reason I hate acronyms is firstly because it means that essentially I won't understand the story I'm reading, and I need to go and Google it. And usually the Google has got many more versions of what the interpretation could be. I've seen two things creeping in the last couple of weeks, and I want it to stop. The first is UX. Now, we all know user experience is very important. We've just mentioned it. It's got to stop. So let's not have any more UXs, please, out there. It's creeping in, and I don't like it. And the other one, and we're just about to go into this, is Paul's predictions for next week, and he's going to give us an insight into a story that we will be writing, and it's monetization as a service, which is a perfectly reasonable thing. I mean, even that in its own right doesn't mean anything. But now we're turning that into an acronym. So I just want to say right now, if you want to say MaaS, I shall just switch off my
I think technically it would be MaaS, but I won't say. I won't use MaaS because I agree. There's
seriously, serious point. I think if service providers and merchants, if service providers and telemedia providers want to communicate what they do to vertical sectors that don't necessarily get the benefits of working in the telemedia industry with telemedia providers, the last thing you want to do is start throwing in more acronyms. And I think
I think you're right. I think you're right. However, it is actually it's monetization platforms as a service, which is MaaS, I think. But we won't be saying MaaS. However, I do think if you step back and just think, well, monetization platforms as a service, what on earth is that? But actually, it is quite a clever and interesting idea, because I got this from talking to our friends at Centilli, but they're not the only sort of player that's sort of got the same idea around this. But it's essentially, rather than acting like sort of aggregators and adding some payment services, and that's all fine, which has worked beautifully up until now, there's a whole tranche of players coming through who are looking at how to offer a service really to some, to network operators, but also to people like the Premier League and to Netflix and to Spotify and to anyone really who wants to add a mixture from content, marketing, messaging, payments, pick and mix from those things. They run them on a platform. You plug in, you take the bits you want, and it is a monetization service. It is taking all these things that we've dealt with, often sort of separately in our telemedia world, and packaging them up and selling them to these companies. And I think it brings us neatly back to where we started with the Premier League, in that offering organizations like that, and like I say, Netflix and Spotify and God knows who else has not even yet been invented, the ability to have these services as a sort of plug-in that they pay to use, that someone else runs, is an excellent and logical next step. And it does tap into the the sudden need we have for consumers to have these experiences. Now, you mentioned food delivery. I mean, I personally think that everything is on the table as pretty much for carrier billing and alternative sort of payment mechanisms. But something like food delivery could use this monetization as a service idea, because not only do they need to sort of, take the payments for the takeaway food, which is obviously the primary thing, they are going to want content marketing. They are going to want messaging interaction. They are going to want to use RCS, say, to tickle someone into having a curry. And what better than to give them a message with some nice pictures of a delicious curry and a button they can press, and it's suddenly winging its way to them. So I think this move that we're going to see, and we're starting to see, we're going to see more of companies like Centilli and Docomo and there's many others, of packaging these things up into a service that they can sell into these mainstream organizations, is going to be one of the key sort of telemedia things for 2021. And it sort of revolutionizes, I think, sort of what our industry does. It changes it from a sort of throughput model into a sort of, as Zoran from Centilli rather poetically put it, into orchestrating the whole offering for consumers that brands can tap into. So that's neatly brought us back to where we started. But it's an interesting concept. And I think it sounds like the panel that Julia was chairing have also covered this and brought into this, perhaps without the acronym, the same idea. We're all, are now on the same page. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And also the interesting thing to watch who the winners are going to be in offering it.
Yeah, well, no, that's dead right. I mean, you're right to reference that particular session, and I mean, Sam Media in particular was, I think whilst they didn't use that particular acronym, thank goodness, I think they did make the point that they've started to develop content in-house. They do their own marketing. So they're already starting to, and obviously they have payment partners. So they're already starting to bring all of those elements in under one roof. But then, from my point of view, I'm thinking back over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I mean, I think that has been a trend as the word aggregator came online. So I think, if you are aggregating content, if you look at most content aggregators right now, they will also say DCB. Now, they might not be their actual billing technology. They might be partnering with somebody else. But, I think we've seen that for quite a long time, that if you've got the customer, then it's a good idea that you can offer them all of the tools that they might need to monetize either their ability to get eyeballs or to monetize their content in some way. So I don't think it's necessarily a new thing, but I think what we're talking about here is, like, as you point out, a new way of packaging it up in order to
I think so. I think the key difference is that we're now seeing the addition into this of messaging and that side of the interaction. I think as well, it's also going to drive this move that we're going to see in a much broader sense, that sort of a lot of commercial or commerce is going to be off the back of marketing that's going to happen through messaging platforms. Social media marketing and social commerce is sort of on the up. But I think the next big thing that's just right on the heels of that is this messaging commerce. And I think these companies that are bringing that side of it, the marketing, messaging aspect, into payments, content, and managing all that as a plug-in for people for businesses to tap into which bits they need, is going to take a lot of this into unknown or as yet sort of unexplored areas like food delivery and God knows what else.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, and I think that it's a sort of final point, and again, the sort of concluding point or points that were made in the session that I've just been enjoying was that there is a sort of new world order, and I think that the message was sort of forget what you knew in 2018, 2019, reevaluate your strategies, working habits, consumer habits are changing, start drilling down into the data and start putting things back together, ready for the new world order. And despite the fact that we've got or it looks as though we're starting to see the green shoots of a vaccine, and that life won't go back to normal, and your 66 days to develop a habit is we're well over that. So work life balances, consumer behavior is going to change, and And this is definitely the time to start taking on board all of these this new strategic thinking in order to satisfy, you know, a digital consumer that now wants digital experiences that reflect, you know, more of the things that they're interested in real life. They've got more viewing. They're now educating themselves as to how to consume content. And I've got a delivery at the door right now, so we're going to have to sign off until next week.
Absolutely. Yes, vaccinations. One of us got a placebo.
Exactly. I've got wood to chop. I've got to go.
You go, Vern.
See you next week, mate.
Ta-da.
Bye.